Welcome to Lair the Alchemist and another edition of Sabbath Sunday. Darren and I are back to answer your Sabbath-related questions. Darren and I do a Black Sabbath podcast together called Into the Void, a Black Sabbath podcast. I will leave a link below in the description for everyone to check that out if you haven't already. All right, so we've had a lot of fun with this. We've already answered a whole bunch of questions, but we still got some more here in the lined up for us. So we're just going to jump right into this. So Darren, give us what's our first question here? Who's it from and what's the question?
First question is from Chad Elder, and he asks, hopefully this is already in the queue for your Into the Void podcast, but a discussion of the Live Evil album, the mixed controversy, and Dio's departure would be interesting and informative. It would be good to have in one place a summary of what happened based on the various accounts out there. That might require some research, but maybe you and Darren are already familiar with the story. Yeah, we I think we're kind of in the process of researching that album for our next podcast. I know I've been reading up on it, and I got some background on that, but we're not going to get too into that now because we're going to get into that pretty extensively in our Live Evil podcast. But without getting completely into it, I mean, the basic gist of it, from what I've read, from my understanding, is that basically we had the band splitting into two. We had Geezer and Tony, and we had Vinny and Ronnie. And Vinny and Ronnie were New Yorkers, and Geezer and Tony were, from England, and had been in the band since 1969. And they had their thing, and Ronnie and Vinny had their thing. And one of the things that Geezer and Tony had in common was drugs. And Ronnie
and lots of it.
Lots of it. And Ronnie and Vinny didn't share in that sort of thing. And the other thing that was in the works was Ronnie had signed a contract with Warner Brothers for a solo album. And obviously Vinny was going to be a part of that. So there's Tony and Geezer were aware of that, but they became aware of that. And I think there was a little friction going on there. And when you're in that situation, you have to wonder, well, is it going to be possible for the person, in this case, Ronnie, to be in Black Sabbath and contribute as much as he would if he didn't have a solo contract, a solo album coming up that he's going to have to compile material for? So where's the good material going to go? Is it going to go to Black Sabbath, or is it going to go to the Ronnie James Dio solo album? So, I mean, that's a natural thing to be concerned about. And I think that was part of what was going on as well. And that was kind of the nail in the coffin. In addition to that, so there was a division, there's team one and team two, and really it should have been one team, but there was like two teams. And Ronnie and Vinny would go into the studio during normal hours, normal being during the day, when they get up, go there and get their work done. Whereas Tony and Geezer would go much later. So they couldn't quite get their schedules together. And I think Ronnie also overassessed his value in the band, and it wasn't completely unrealistic for Ronnie to pat himself on the back and to give himself accolades for what he had accomplished and where he had taken Black Sabbath from where they ended with Ozzy to where they were at that time. But, I think he kind of figured that he was probably the most important, or definitely had a very high priority of high assessment of his value in the band. And that, unfortunately, affected the album in the way that he wanted his voice, his vocals to be heard in the mix. And subsequently, I think Live Evil didn't mind it at the time because I really didn't have too much to compare it to. But once I started diving into some of the the bootlegs, and then more recently when Live at Hammersmith, the 3-record set came out, then I realized that there were actually better versions of this band live, and a lot of them were in just the recordings that were FM broadcasts, or ones that were, you know, privately recorded and traded, you know, aka bootlegs. So, and it was around the time that, because of these reasons, that the band pretty much started to fall apart. And like I said, though, you know, we'll get more into detail when we do the podcast.
Yeah, I think it basically comes down to, I think people have to remember that the Heaven and Hell album was basically written between Tony and Ronnie. Geezer was absent for most of that. You can listen to our Heaven and Hell podcast for more in depth on that. And Bill was struggling with his addictions, alcohol at the time. So it was really Tony and Ronnie that wrote that most of Heaven and Hell. Mob Rules comes around, and now Vinny's in the band. There's this sort of separation. You got the Brits, you got the Americans on one side. Ronnie's maybe asserting himself a little bit more, and now Geezer's back, and they're writing more as a band rather than a dynamic just between Tony and Ronnie. Remember, Tony had a lot of these riffs probably that they worked out beforehand. They had attempted some of this stuff with Ozzy. That's going to be part of our next question, so we won't get too much into that. So I think the friction maybe started there. You throw drugs into it. Well, let's go. Ronnie's a strong personality. He knows what he wants. All right, so a little bit of friction is maybe starting there. Now you throw in drugs, Geezer and Tony, a classic example of people not properly communicating. Ronnie and Vinny say they were getting to the studio. Geezer and Tony weren't there, so they just said, hey, throw up this song, turn this up, turn this down. They were just listening to stuff, messing around with mixes. Geezer and Tony show up, and the engineer makes it sound like Ronnie and Vinny are trying to run the thing. And of course, nobody just sits down and has a conversation. Instead, it's a lot of trying to guess what the other person is thinking. And then Ronnie already has one foot out the door, maybe in the back of his mind. He knows he has his solo deal, and that's that. I think the mix suffers, like you, Darren, said. At the time, I didn't have anything to reference it against, and I thought it was just cool to have live Black Sabbath. But now when we hear Hammersmith, when you hear that Portland show that's on the Mob Rules Deluxe, you realize like there would have been much better options. The album just suffers from way too many overdubs in the studio, not enough audience noise into it. But we'll delve deeply into that when we get to our Live Evil episode, which as of the recording of this video is going to be our next podcast episode. So keep an eye and an ear out for that. All right, our next question here is from CD Collector. He says, I'm really enjoying these Sabbath Sunday talks, great insights and very informative. One mystery that has really intrigued me these past several years is the alleged demos of Ozzy supposedly singing early versions of Children of the Sea and Die Young when Sabbath was attempting to create a follow-up album to Never Say Die in early '79. As we all know, the band was really struggling at this point, and it culminated in Ozzy being fired. Do you know anything about these demos? If they do exist, do you think there's any chance Iommi would even make them commercially available for those of us who are hardcore fans, perhaps bonus tracks for a potential future Never Say Die box set? Thanks. Now, I've heard them talk about this, that they did work on some of these songs. He may have used the word demo. I don't remember ever really hearing Tony say demo. I just remember hearing him say that they had sort of started to work on the very early versions of like Children of the Sea. Maybe he had the riffs or something like that. I'm really guessing that they never got to the point that they made any kind of rough demo or anything of any of this early stuff that they were doing with Ozzy. Interestingly enough, there was very briefly some, I wouldn't call them demos, they were rehearsal tapes that Jeff Nichols, who would be the keyboard player for Black Sabbath, although when Geezer was absent from the Heaven and Hell sessions, this is when Jeff Nichols comes into the fold. Jeff Nichols, a friend of Tony. Jeff Nichols was in the band Quartz. Jeff Nichols is sort of a jack of all trades. He can play guitar, he can play keyboards, he can sing a little bit. So he came in and was actually playing bass for a little while Geezer was absent. Apparently Jeff must have had a boom box or something where he was recording some of the things they were working on. And very briefly on YouTube, you had a early version of Heaven and Hell, and you had a song that didn't make the record that was called, what was it called? Slapback or something?
Slapback.
Yeah.
Slapback.
I wouldn't call those demos. That's just probably something Jeff was making just for his own reference to remember ideas by. So do I think that there's demos that exist of Ozzy singing over any riffs that eventually made it on Heaven and Hell? No, I don't think that those exist. And even if they did exist, I really, really doubt that that they would release anything like that. For example, those Jeff Nichols things, they disappeared from the internet almost as quickly as they went up, which I'm sure whoever posted those, somebody was supposed to be a relative of Jeff Nichols. I'm sure that they got a cease and desist order from the Sabbath camp or from Tony Iommi personally, his lawyer. So I don't think any demos exist. If they do, I don't think they would make it onto a box set. I would love it if they did. Tony seems to be against like this type of thing, releasing this type of stuff. So I don't think it would see the light of day. And honestly, I don't think that it exists. What do you think, Darren?
I think Tony definitely asserts a lot of control over Sabbath material. Who knows what is in a cardboard box in somebody's closet somewhere. You know, obviously, like you referenced the Jeff Nichols tapes. I hadn't heard anything about that. All of a sudden, it just dropped out of nowhere, and there it was, and we were all like, "Wow, this is really cool. How did we not hear about this?" Well, there's probably a lot of things like this. As far as demos, I mean, if you're talking about something that was like professionally recorded, though with a smaller budget, just for posterity or something like that. No, probably not something that was done in the studio, but I mean, there might have been. It's conceivable. It's probably very likely that there was a recording of Ozzy fleshing out some melodies to Tony introducing the riffs to Heaven and Hell or Children of the Sea. Possibly, I mean, it's like Bob Daisley posted the Lee Kerslake and Randy,
Doing Flying High Again,
working on Flying High Again, and these things just pop up out of nowhere. So who knows? I do wonder though. We talk about this a lot. We talk about when will we ever hear, or when will the versions of like Song for Jim or When I Came Down be released, or The Rebel? When's that stuff going to come out? It's there. We've heard snippets of it, and there's a lot of little things like that. Like when are we going to see the full video for the California Jam? These things that never seem to come to fruition, but we know they're out there. And I wonder, it's like when the surviving, well, all members have survived, but when they no longer are alive, when Tony's gone and Geezer's gone and Ozzy's gone and Bill's gone, who's going to have control over all these things? And is somebody at some point going to walk into a vault and find all these? Because Tony often references that he has tons of tapes of riffs, and he just, when he wants to work on a song, he'll just pull one out, listen to it, pick it up, or move on to the next one. He does catalog a lot of his ideas. Somewhere there's probably a treasure trove of things that we would just be amazed and completely thrilled as the big Black Sabbath fans that we are, to hear some of this stuff. But for now, I don't think there's a hope in hell of it coming out, especially not being released commercially.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, which I do believe, Iommi seems to have something against like those early demos, like the Rebel and stuff like. Clearly, they have it, because if you remember, there are these 2 VHS tapes that came out in the 90s. I forget what they were called. They were like a history of the band.
Black Sabbath history, volume 1 and 2.
Yeah, it was like one was a red cover, and I forget what the other
It
one
was
was.
like black and gold. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was an official thing. The band was interviewed for it and everything. And you hear little snippets of the Rebel.
Hmm.
And I can't remember if there's anything else in there. But so the band, somebody has it. The band knows that it exists. And I was going to say that, and I do think if I'm a betting man, we're never going to see that stuff. We're never going to see if there is something with Ozzy messing around on some of these riffs. I don't think we'll ever see it. But they did put out that, remember Weevil woman from the Master of Reality thing? I mean, that's pretty much like what we're talking about right here. It's just a riff and Ozzy
Yeah.
riffing over the top of it. I mean, it's pretty messy. It's pretty sloppy. You would think that, but they put that out. So they put that out. Why wouldn't they put out the Rebel or When I Came Down, or maybe something that they were working on between Never Say Die and Heaven and Hell with Ozzy? Why wouldn't they do that? Except for the fact that Black Sabbath seems to have this thing about not really giving the hardcore fans what they want. It's like we always seem to be. We're sitting here on pins and needles, just hoping that we do get a Never Say Die box set. That's not even a guarantee.
I know.
I would love to say that, oh yeah, because it makes total sense that they would make a
Sure.
box set for each one of the 8 Ozzy albums from them. But this is Black Sabbath. They'll leave us hanging. We're just going to get like a remaster of the record and that's it, or something like that.
It's completely unpredictable. I remember our conversation, that we had a month or so ago. Yeah, about a month ago, and we were answering questions, and one of the questions was, "Will Black Sabbath release another box set?" And I said, "Well, it's anybody's guess, but it would seem likely that they would have something prepared to release over Christmas. I mean, that's a great time to make it." And here we are. I mean, we're
3 weeks away, 2.5 weeks away from Christmas.
yeah.
Anybody with any kind of business sense would just say it makes total sense to do this.
And
But
yet
this is the
they're
world of
not.
Black Sabbath, and just things operate in a different way.
Yeah, I can't figure it out.
And it's
But when
frustrating because the fans, let's face it, at this point, the majority of people who are buying Black Sabbath records are people who are already fans. I'm sure that there's somebody out there somewhere that's just discovering them for the first time and going out and buying Paranoid on vinyl, or with the vinyl craze, people who never owned vinyl and now they want to go out and buy Paranoid and have it on a new vinyl record. But the majority of the fans are people that own all the stuff already. So they're out there. You give them what they want. Open up the vaults. If you don't do it now, when are you going to do it? Don't let it, like you said, maybe when nobody is around, who does control
yeah,
these states at that point. But why wait till then? Why not do it now? But there's this constant thing. It's like with the Tony Martin remasters. We're sitting here, waiting. You ever see that meme? They use something like a skeleton sitting on a park bench, like me waiting for the Tony Martin
yeah.
remasters. And it's these things football keeps getting kicked down the road on these. And I think we have some questions about Born Again in here. And that's another thing. I just found the Born Again tapes. So Tony's saying he's going to remix this. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, at the rate we're going with these boxes, it's going to be another year before they get through the Ozzy era box things. And, we're probably talking maybe 2 years from now,
Yeah.
we'll see this
Yeah.
Born Again
Yeah,
remix. And then maybe after that, a year after that, we'll start the Martin remixes will trickle in. So what are we talking? Like it's going to take another 5 to 7 years before we get all of the Sabbath catalog properly remastered. And my goodness.
But you never know. You never know. For an RSD, the next RSD that's coming up, I don't know when it is, but all of a sudden it could be, well, it probably won't be a Born Again remix. I think there'll be a lot more promotion involved with that, and a lot more advertising, and there's going to be a lot more excitement about that one. But who knows? I mean, they could. I mean, I would not be surprised if they suddenly release a remastered version of Tear on picture disc, you know, and it just pops out. Who knows? I mean, I wouldn't be shocked. I would not be shocked. Or Seven Star. Why not Seven Star? Maybe Eternal Idol might come out.
Yeah,
Picture
'cause
disc.
that's one of the
RSD
Warner
version.
Brothers records. So
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe we might start getting into the IRS stuff. I mean, I don't know. I don't know where they are with that. I mean, have they? Has Tony? Has he gotten the rights back to that
yeah,
stuff? Where?
yeah, that's where the comments
For
about
the box set with the Tony Martin, right? Yeah.
that's where these comments about
Sure.
him redoing the Tony Martin stuff came up. He mentioned in some interviews that he got the rights to these records, to those albums. And for those who don't know out there, the early Sabbath stuff is owned now by Warner Brothers. Everything up to and including Eternal Idol and Dehumanizer. Everything else was on IRS, which is basically the Tony Martin era. The Tony Martin era stuff, except for Eternal Idol, is all on IRS, which is now, I believe, a defunct label. So the rights to those records were owned by IRS forever. Iommi must have the rights to them now, and so he can do with them as he pleases. And he's commented that they're going to do something with them. They're going to reissue them or do something. But unfortunately, he said, well, we had these Ozzy, and this is going back now a good year and a half, the Ozzy and Dio sets that were coming out, where he was making references to these box sets. And so, like with everything with Black Sabbath, it's like everything revolves around the first 8 Ozzy records, repackaging them endlessly. But I mean, I think at some point, Tony Iommi does seem to be, he seems to be an active person, you know what I mean? Like in the sense that he's doing things. So I do get the feeling that it will eventually happen. It's just, I'm sure there's just an absolute mountain of red tape and logistics and stuff that has to be dealt with in order for some of these things to see some sort of proper release. And I hope that they do get a proper release. All of us Martin era fans have been sitting, waiting forever. These albums have been out of print forever, even on CD. So if they come out with really nice sets and they really give the people what we want, the B-sides from Headless Cross and demos and live shows and everything, the wait will certainly be worth it.
There's a couple of things. We're talking about we're just trying to get through the Ozzy era. I like to look at that as a chronological situation where we have to get to get to the end. You have to start at the beginning, obviously. So we're working our way through that, but I'm hoping that we will continue beyond Never Say Die if we get to Never Say Die. I mean, at this point, who even knows if, I mean, Technical Ecstasy, was that Adam
We were nervous about that. Yeah, we were thinking that we would get it.
And lo and behold, there it is. And it was received really well. I mean, it had I think it got a lot of attention. I think it seemed to do pretty well. I mean, in sales, I mean, a couple of record stores I go to locally, they had it in stock and then it sold. So, I mean, they seem to be a viable thing for the band to continue to package up and release. And so moving forward, we have to go backwards. We're not really moving chronologically. We've skipped, well, we didn't start with the first album. We started with Paranoid. And then they didn't release Master of Reality, and then they released Volume 4. And then they didn't release Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, but they released Sabotage. And then right after Sabotage, then the one after that, Technical Ecstasy, then that came out. But we still have to get the first album. We still need Master of Reality, and we still need Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. So we're not even really working in chronological order. We're working in Black Sabbath order.
And they released Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, even though we didn't get proper box sets with those. We got deluxe editions or however they.
And then we also got Dehumanizer, that was, don't forget, there was a double album, the remaster. Well, there was a remaster. Rhino did the Dio era remasters in 2008, and those sounded great. And I bought them
Yeah.
when they came out. And then,
Which were deluxe editions. They did deluxe editions of all the Warner Brothers stuff. So for instance, the Seventh Star, it had a Glenn Hughes live show on it. Eternal Idol had the Ray Gillen version of the record on there. So it's possible that they may not even do anything with Seventh Star and Eternal Idol. They may say, all right, Dehumanizer, that had a bonus disc with live B-sides and stuff, that maybe they might this might be it once they're done with the Ozzy stuff.
Vinyl, because with the vinyl, the Dehumanizer came out, I think a couple years ago, and that seemed to come out of nowhere. It was a double album, and it had already been remastered for a 2008 release by Rhino, and it sounded great. In fact, so did Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules and Live Evil. I got all of them. And they sounded great. In fact, the new ones, the double albums that came out, the Heaven and Hell and the bonus material aside, the remastered studio albums, I don't think sounded as good as the 2008 versions.
I agree.
But that's beside the point. We're going in all kinds of different directions. So we're in, on one hand, we've got this succession, this odd release schedule of the Ozzy era on box set. We're missing some significant ones. Obviously, Master of Reality is pretty significant. First album, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. You know, are they gonna come out? What's going on? It's kind of strange that they wouldn't. It's kind of strange that, much as I love Technical Ecstasy, it's kind of strange that they would release Technical Ecstasy but not Sabbath Bloody Sabbath or Master of Reality. You know, I mean, that's classic songs, Sweet Leaf, Children of the Grave. So, you know, what are they doing, and what is the motive, and what are they? I mean, is this all leading up to a big release? And we had talked about that. We thought, well, one of these more iconic records is going to be released in the deluxe format probably around Christmas time, and here we are, and nothing has shown up. There's no word about it. But I'd like to think that we're going to get from the Dio and Ozzy era releases are sort of like happening simultaneously, but once we get through the Ozzy era, the only thing left to do is for them to start, or Tony or whoever it is that's making the decisions here, is to release the Tony Martin era stuff, and Born Again. You know, I don't know if Born Again is going to fall in the succession where it's going to come out after we go through the Ozzy era, and really we're pretty much done with the Dio, unless they're going to do a Live Evil box set or something, because that's the only one, other than the 2008 release, that's the only one that hasn't come out recently. Or at least we've got Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, but we didn't have Live Evil. And we've also got Dehumanizer. Dehumanizer came out before the more recent versions, the remastered, the deluxe versions, the double record set of Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. We don't have a Live Evil, so maybe that would be the next thing. I wouldn't be surprised, but I'd like to think that it would only make sense for it to move forward, and we're gonna at some point get the Tony Martin remasters. Hopefully, we're still alive when it happens. My only hope.
Our grandkids.
Yeah.
Oh, if only Grandpa Darren was here, he would have loved this. This tier deluxe.
What's cool about that, though?
They're going to come and lay it on our tombstones.
Yeah, well, hopefully before that. But I mean, if I don't get them until I'm 85, that would really validate that Black Sabbath was a lifelong
True.
pursuit. It was a lifelong interest, passion. Like, oh, I got into Black Sabbath when I was 8 or 9, 10, and now I'm 85 and I'm still a fan. And here I have the deluxe version of Never Say Die.
Yeah, we'll have our little thing that we put up to our ear and
yeah. to put the hearing aid in.
Song for Jim. I heard it.
Finally, and I'll probably be calling you and say, "Hey, did you get it?"
Yeah.
What? But yeah, I mean, I think, and the other thing is, I mean, we have to look at it from a, from a financial standpoint. The band is done. There's not going to be any more tours. Tony Iommi will probably, I think, and this is another question I think that somebody asked about a song that he recently posted that we'll get into. But so he still has the desire to be active musically, and I think he probably will be. And I think Geezer probably will be too. And I don't know about Bill, but and I'm not sure about Ozzy. I know Ozzy's got one more album left, and he's got one more album on deck. I think it's going to be coming out pretty soon, and that should be exciting because Tony contributed some music, contributed in some capacity to that, so that'll be cool. But at some point, everything's going to kind of wind down, and there's going to be a need to keep the financial money train moving along. And so, I think that it's reasonable to think that there's going to be something to keep the money flowing. And if there's some unreleased studio material or unremastered studio albums, I think it's probably a safe bet that we're going to see them. The question is just when's it going to happen? And we're all,
and it would be interesting, you mentioned Live Evil, if they were to give that a remix, like the way they did Live at Last on the Volume 4 box set. For those who don't know out there, they Live at Last, they took that and they did a proper remix, meaning the levels of all the instruments, the crowd noise was brought way up. It made it a completely different record. I'd imagine if they took Live Evil and gave it sort of a similar treatment, it really opened it up, brings the crowd noise into it, that could really change the dynamic of that record.
Yeah, it would give it a new life. I'm not sure it's the best. Having heard things after that, I'm not sure it's. I think there's one from Portland that was really, really good.
That's what's on the Mob Rules.
Yeah.
Deluxe.
Okay.
That's the FM broadcast.
There's a Connecticut show. Is that anywhere?
That's on the Heaven and Hell. The B-sides from the Heaven and Hell era that show up on the deluxe Heaven and Hell, those are all from Connecticut. But that whole show does exist out there. I don't know if they've put out that entire show. You just there were live B-sides that they put out when the album came out. And those are what you see on the deluxe edition. It's like Die Young and Heaven and Hell, and I think Neon Nights and stuff like that. But that show was either an FM radio or it was properly recorded. Actually, if you really wanted to figure this out, sit down. There must be somebody somewhere, maybe on the black-sabbath.com site, Joe Sigler's excellent Black Sabbath site, where you could go and find out all the radio broadcasts that Sabbath has done, because pretty much everything that they're putting out that's been live, the show in the Sabotage box was an FM broadcast. The Technical Ecstasy show was a radio broadcast. The Portland show that we just talked about, the Connecticut show that we just talked about. So I have a feeling if there's any other radio broadcasts out there that haven't been released yet, those might see the light of day at some point, either in a box or as some, who knows.
Yeah, but there still is Live Evil, and it's still it was an official release, and it still has it has a fan base. People love the album, and I think that they can get in there and remix it, which I'm sure they can. It has been remastered. Like I said, the 2008 Rhino release was remastered, and that one I didn't notice that much of a difference, an audible difference as much as I did. I mean, I think that the 2008 version of Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, very noticeably improved over the original. And I love the original version of Mob Rules. I think the contrast between Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules is pretty profound, production quality wise. But the 2008, both albums, but particularly Mob Rules sounds really on point. It's a big improvement, noticeable improvement anyway. I guess big improvement would be a subjective call, but it's a noticeable improvement. So yeah, there we are.
Yeah, I'm going to read the next question because we sort of answered parts of this already. So this is from John the Dark Wizard. To John and Darren, when will Tony Iommi remix and Get Done Born Again? We just talked about that. He goes, there was a mention of Tony was going to do it so people will get a better record of the album, to do the same for Forbidden as well. We kind of talked about all the Martin era stuff, but yeah, Forbidden is something that Tony has talked about remixing, doing a remix of that record, although I don't think a remix is really going to do a whole lot to change my opinion of the record. Who knows? Maybe it'll help it a little.
He seems to think it will. Basically, that's what he said in the interview. He thinks that that album got a bad break because of the mix, the production. So we'll see. But I'm with you. I mean, there's other things that you can't fix in the mix.
Can't change the songs.
You can't change the songs. You can't change the lyrics.
Yeah.
Martin,
yeah. Tony, unfortunately, sounds like his voice is just sort of damaged and
starting to
tired.
croak out. Yeah. That's unfortunate.
But who knows? I mean, it may cause us to appreciate the album or see the album in a slightly different light. Who knows? And I don't hate Forbidden. It's just,
I think
it's
cool.
if I have to rank the Sabbath albums, it is my least favorite though.